In a nondescript chemical factory in Wuhan, workers in white lab coats package powder into unmarked boxes. The labels read research chemicals or industrial compounds. But these aren't going to laboratories or factories. They're destined for drug cartels in Mexico, synthesis labs in the Netherlands, and distribution networks across North America. This is the invisible pipeline that's reshaping the global drug trade, and it's hidden in plain sight. Let's establish the magnitude of what we're dealing with. In 2023 alone, 72,776 Americans died from fentanyl overdoses. That's 199 deaths every single day. Over 250,000 Americans have lost their lives to fentanyl since 2021. To put that in perspective, more Americans have died from this one drug in the last 3 years than were killed in the entire Vietnam War. Fentanyl is now involved in 69% of all drug overdose deaths in America. It's in counterfeit pills, it's laced into heroin, it's mixed into cocaine. Users don't even know they're consuming it, and one mistake is fatal. The United States experienced a 40% surge in opioid-related deaths between 2019 and 2020 alone. And where does this lethal substance originate? Almost entirely from one place: China. According to the US Department of State, China has been the principal manufacturer of fentanyl trafficked into the United States since 2013. The US intelligence community estimates that China accounts for approximately 70% of all illicit fentanyl produced globally. To comprehend the scale, imagine a warehouse the size of a football stadium filled with fentanyl. That's the annual production capacity we're discussing. But here's where this becomes a geopolitical story, not just a health crisis. The Chinese government isn't simply turning a blind eye to this production. According to a 2024 report from the House Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the US and China, Beijing is actively subsidizing it. To understand how China maintains its dominance, we need to trace the evolution of the supply chain. In the early 2010s, Chinese pharmaceutical companies shipped finished fentanyl directly to the United States. This was crude, dangerous, and traceable. DEA agents were interdicting containers at port. By 2018-2019, facing intense diplomatic pressure from the US, China made a strategic move. In May 2019, Beijing officially scheduled fentanyl and all fentanyl-type drugs as controlled substances. This looked like progress. It looked like China was finally cracking down. Instead of ceasing production, Chinese traffickers simply shifted their business model. Rather than shipping finished fentanyl, they began exporting the precursor chemicals and the raw ingredients needed to synthesize fentanyl. The Mexican drug cartels would receive these chemicals, manufacture the fentanyl in clandestine labs hidden in the mountains of Sinaloa, and then traffic it north into the US. Here's the shocking part. China only controls 3 precursor chemicals out of hundreds that can be used to manufacture fentanyl. When traffickers face restrictions on one precursor, they simply switch to another that remains unscheduled. Now let's shift focus to the receiving end of the supply chain. Los Chapitos, the cocaine cartel controlled by El Chapo's sons, has transformed fentanyl production from a sideline into their primary business. They pioneered industrial-scale fentanyl manufacturing in Mexico, turning the substance into the world's most lucrative and lethal drug. Los Chapitos operates a vertically integrated fentanyl empire. They control the procurement of precursor chemicals from China. They oversee the clandestine labs hidden in the mountains where synthesis occurs. They manage distribution networks that funnel the finished product across the US border. In June 2025, the US Treasury designated Los Chapitos as a foreign terrorist organization. How does a Mexican cartel transform billions of dollars in drug cash into usable capital? The answer is a sophisticated money laundering system orchestrated by Chinese criminal networks operating globally. It's called flying money. A Mexican cartel like the Sinaloa cartel traffics massive quantities of fentanyl into the US. They generate billions in drug proceeds, dollar bills stacked in warehouses. Now they have a problem. How do you move billions in cash back to Mexico or China without triggering law enforcement alerts? The Justice Department documented a case where Chinese underground money exchanges helped the Sinaloa cartel launder more than $50 million in fentanyl proceeds between 2019 and 2023. The operation involved a network of what's called Daigou shoppers. individuals who were given cash from cartel proceeds and instructed to purchase specific high-value items. These Daigou then shipped the purchased goods back to China, where they were sold. The proceeds were converted to Chinese currency, and voila! Cartel money became legitimate Chinese commerce. While fentanyl grabs headlines, China's role extends far beyond opioids. The methamphetamine epidemic ravaging communities across America, Asia, and Australia also has roots in Chinese chemical exports. The Golden Triangle region of Southeast Asia, where Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos meet, has become one of the world's largest methamphetamine production zones. UN drug officials estimate that production in this region has reached industrial scale, with hundreds of millions of doses produced annually. Investigations consistently trace the precursor chemicals back to Chinese suppliers. In essence, China has become the world's primary supplier of two distinct synthetic drug categories, fentanyl and methamphetamine. The government subsidizes both. The chemicals flow freely, and the demand is endless. Even if the Chinese government wanted to stop fentanyl production tomorrow, the structural reality of synthetic drugs makes interdiction nearly impossible. Fentanyl can be synthesized through multiple different chemical pathways, each requiring different precursor chemicals. Traffickers switch to alternative synthesis routes using precursor chemicals that are legal and have legitimate industrial uses. The same chemical used to manufacture pesticides or plastics can also be the first step in fentanyl synthesis. According to research from the Brookings Institution, even maximally aggressive Chinese law enforcement actions would not solve the US fentanyl problem. The supply chain has become decentralized, distributed, and adaptable. Shutting down one company means 3 others emerge. As long as there is a massive demand for drugs in the West and massive industrial capacity in the East, this flow will continue. This story continues to unfold. Just in 2024 and 2025, the US government has issued new sanctions, launched investigations, and designated cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. But without addressing China's role in the subsidies, the weak enforcement, and the criminal networks operating with impunity, the fentanyl crisis will persist. The workers packaging chemicals in those factories in Wuhan probably don't think of themselves as drug dealers. The shipping companies transporting containers probably don't know what they're really carrying. The customs officials in ports around the world are overwhelmed by the sheer volume of legitimate trade and can only expect a tiny fraction of shipments. This isn't just a Chinese problem or an American problem. It's a global crisis that requires global solutions. It demands honesty about the challenges, sustained cooperation between nations that are often at odds, and recognition that there are no quick fixes. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.